Okay, first I'm going to start off by saying giving honor to God who is the head of my life, and I call him Jesus. And I also want to say that on the onset of this conversation here, I want to thank God for my pastor, Overseer Dwight Kimball. He's the pastor of the Woodland Park AOH Church of God. That's AOH Apostolic Overcoming Holy Church of God. My brother Brian Murphy asked me to give a little piece here on the oneness of God, and so that's what I intend on doing here. Traditionally, people believe that apostolics will run to Deuteronomy 6 and 4 in the Old Testament to begin a basis of our argument. So when we say that Jesus is God, we're saying that he's the one God of Israel of the Old Testament. So I'm not going to go to Deuteronomy 6 and 4 initially for that. I want to go to the very beginning, Genesis 1 and 1, where it simply says, in the beginning, God. That's the first statement we get in Scripture, and it opens up with a rich statement of monotheism. Monotheism meaning one God, the study of one God. So, in the beginning, God, singular, one God, in the beginning, God by himself, in the beginning, God only, in the beginning, God with no one else. So if you can't get with that, then let's just close it up and go somewhere and pray. Because that's what we initially need to understand here. As we move forward, I'll now jump to the New Testament, where Galatians lets us know that the law of the Old Testament was merely just a schoolmaster to lead us unto Christ. Now, if the law's job is to lead us unto Christ, then what we must understand here is that the concepts don't change once we jump to the New Testament. If the concept of the Old Testament teach one God, then when we get to the New Testament, it's still one God. Because the law is the schoolmaster that leads us up unto Christ. So it's just to direct us to God. And it directs us to God, keeping the same concepts as we get to the New Testament. One of the biggest concepts of the Old Testament teaching was the teaching of one God. Now we go to Deuteronomy 6 and 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. The people of the Judaism faith began to call this basic confession of faith the Shema, which means to hear. Hear, O Israel, hear. Shema in the Hebrew is to hear. This was their basic confession of faith. If you read throughout that entire 6th chapter, you find out that this was to be taught the one God. The monotheistic mind frame was to be taught to their children, to all coming generations throughout the entirety of time. This was not to stop. They were to say this when they were walking by the way, when they were doing their daily routines and activities. They were supposed to remind themselves and let their children know that we are bound and we are understood to love the one God. And so, even so, the reference that they had, these people, this group of Judaism, the reference they had for the one God was amazing. It's a reference that we kind of got away from in today's time. They had such a reverence for God until they would see the personal name of God in the Old Testament, L-O-R-D, capital L-O-R-D, Lord, translated Jehovah. They would never say Jehovah because it was the personal name of God. So if they saw the name of Lord, they would say an alias, Adonai, which would be like, quote-unquote, a nickname, because they felt like the name Jehovah carried too much power with it to be saying it aimlessly. They would never even write the name down on parchment unless they were divinely commissioned to, because they were too afraid that someone could come along behind them and rip up the parchment, i.e. defaming the name of God. So they had a reference for the one God that was amazing. Islam would come along with it, even adopt a concept from monotheism in the scriptures. They would say that if you were sleeping, if you were a member of Islam, if you were asleep, someone could come to you in your sleep and say, is God one God? Or is he the true God? And if you woke up, then you were truly monotheistic. This was a concept that they stole from the people who the Judaism faith. So over 50 times in the Bible, you will find that God is referred to as the Holy One, never the Holy Two, Holy Three, or Holy Third.